I want to introduce myself to those of you who I have not met before. My name is Vina Jones-Cox. I am a real estate entrepreneur from Cincinnati, Ohio. I do most of my deals here in the greater Cincinnati area and into Kentucky and Indiana as well. I've been in the real estate business for a lot of years. Bought my first deal on a creative finance deal, by the way, way back in 1989. And I do all sorts of different things in the real estate business. I do a lot of wholesaling. I have rentals, I have lease options, I sell properties on repair for equity deals. And I'm really happy to see you all. And my cohort tonight, my partner in crime, as it were, is Bill Cook. Wave, Bill, so that people know which one is you.
Yeah, Larissa started laughing. Thank you.
And Bill is invests entirely in a 5-mile radius around the Walmart in someplace, Georgia. Cartersville, Georgia. Cartersville, Georgia, and is very much a buy and hold guy. It's interesting for people who are learning from both of us simultaneously for the first time, because in some ways we have a very, very different approach in how we just kind of go about our real estate businesses. I do a lot of direct marketing to generate leads. I have a staff. I aim to do a deal every week. Bill aims to do the deals he wants, and that could be 5 in 1 year, or it could be 0 in 1 year, or it could be 1 in 1 year. But the thing that
I have a pen, I have a phone.
Yeah, his staff is Kim, his wife. And the one thing that we very much agree on is that creative deal structuring is, I'm going to make myself say the grammatically incorrect thing, it's where it's at. And that it has unfortunately gotten, like, just the talking about it and being around people who like to talk about it and learning about it has gotten lost in the wave of quick cash, flip it and forget it, take your $25,000 check, pay your $7,000 in taxes on it, and move on to the next deal tsunami in the real estate education world that's happened over the last, well, it's probably been happening for 20 years, but it's really been strong in the last 10 years. And it's a shame, because a lot of people are walking away from a lot of long-term wealth and passive income by not understanding the value of buying and holding, and then not understanding how to do that without always putting 25% down and qualifying with the bank and all of that sort of stuff. So we're going to talk about one little, yep, I didn't correct. It does say exiting mortgage. That's not an exiting mortgage in the middle. That's an existing mortgage in the middle there. That ham is the existing mortgage, not an exiting mortgage. We're going to tackle one little piece of that today, and that is wrap mortgages, which is one way that we can do creative deals with sellers and have them finance properties for us. The way this particular evening came about is that Bill and I taught a class back in April. We thought it was going to be live, and it ended up being online, and had about 170 people, I guess, at that class. And we covered wrap mortgages in that class amongst a whole bunch of other things. And one of the questions that we kept getting back from the folks who attended that was, I still don't quite get wraps. I still don't quite get wraps. Can you explain wraps again? And he and I were both having these conversations with people, and decided it was probably a good idea just to go ahead and do a training just on wraps to try and straighten that out for everybody. And then we were planning that out, and we said, it doesn't actually, it's a Zoom meeting, and we're not renting a hotel room. It doesn't really cost us any more to have 200 people there than 170 there. So let's just invite everybody. So that's what we're doing tonight, is we're going to talk about this thing that you maybe or maybe have not heard of that you should know more about because it's a really good tool. So for we're gonna answer questions at the end. What we're trying to do is be respectful of the fact that we told people that they would only have to be here from 7 to 8:30 to learn about wraps. So we're hoping to get all of the stuff we've got prepared done by 8:30, but then we've agreed that we will stay on and answer questions that folks have for as long as possible. Say 10 o'clock maybe. But the folks who just came to hear the wrap part and don't have any questions can go ahead and go do whatever you do in the evenings. If you have heard of wrap mortgages, if you could just put yes in the chat box. I'd like to see how many people have not even heard of these things. And
Wow.
then I'm gonna ask you another question in a moment. It looks to me like most people have at least
Yeah.
heard of them.
Wow.
Oh yeah, lots of people have heard of them. Great. So if you've ever actually used one or seen one being used, so this is a different question. It's not have you heard of it, but have you ever done one or ever like observed somebody else doing one? If you could put in I have, so that we can tell the difference between the people who have heard of them and the people who've actually witnessed them.
Wow. A lot of people have done wraps.
Really?
That is
That's
great.
yeah, that is great. Yeah, that's more than I expected, but it's a whole lot less than I've heard of them. You notice that? So let's go ahead and proceed here. It looks like we've got most people admitted. Let me talk a little bit about, basically what we're going to talk about. I'm trying to get rid of this little pop-up box that keeps telling me people are in the waiting room because it's over the top of my slide.
Davina, you should know there's some serious heavy hitters on here. I just saw Ed Taylor's name go by. Pete's on the call. Yeah, you got some
Are you
serious hitters
trying
on
to
here.
intimidate me?
I'm just
Are,
letting you know.
are you trying to make
I'm
me
just
like
letting you know.
feel like now I've got to crank it up to 110%?
Yep.
Okay, so wrap mortgages, which are also called all-inclusive deeds of trust, and we're gonna explain the difference here in a minute, are really good things to have tucked into your creative deal structuring tool bag, because while you don't see them a lot, they are a solution to a couple of problems that I'm betting you have experienced if you have talked to any significant number of sellers, that aren't easily solved by any other strategy that you might know. So for instance, you want to buy a house subject to, and the seller is basically in agreement that you can take over their mortgage, but you've agreed to pay $250 and the seller only owes $150, and that would mean in order to just do a regular subject to, you would have to come up with $100,000 to put down to get down to the amount of the mortgage. Has anybody ever seen a property with a whole bunch of equity in it where the seller was willing to do a subject to, but the loan was just so small compared to the amount of the agreed upon sale price that it was a head scratcher? Like, where does that $100,000 come from? Wraps can solve that problem very cleanly. How about this? Have you ever had a seller who liked the idea of you making his mortgage payment, but he did not like the idea of giving you the deed while he still had a mortgage? Like he said, well, how do I know you're going to make my payments? My credit would get ruined if you didn't make my payments. Anybody ever had that happen? Yeah, looks like it looks like a fair number of people have experienced that seller objection. A wrap mortgage can fix that for you too. You can still buy the house, get the terms you wanted, and the seller doesn't have any concern about the subject to deal. How about this? you are perfectly willing to buy this. It's such a good deal at 250 that you would be willing to pay the seller 6% interest on that $250,000, but the 248 he owes is at 3%. Like, how do you even make that work? How do I do a subject to where the loan is 3%, but the seller wants me to pay 6%, and I want to pay 6%, but the underlying loan is 3%? How do I even do that? The answer is, of course, a wrap. Also, they can be really powerful on the other side, where instead of trying to buy creatively, you are trying to sell creatively. So for instance, you have a buyer for a property. He's willing to pay you a lot more for that property if you finance it for him, but you're the one who has the mortgage with the bank. You're the one who has an underlying loan. You can't pay it off. You can't just say, okay, well, no problem. I'll stroke a check to the bank, pay that off, and now we're good. I can do an owner-held loan. And also, you don't trust him to make your payments for you. Can you see a situation like that might arise? Guess what? Wraps will fix it, and I'm going to show you an example of how in about 20 minutes. There's another really weird thing that wraps can do, and this is going to be one that Bill explains to you and shows you how he's done it. He's done it many times, but he's going to show you one really interesting example. How many of you are private lenders or want to be private lenders? If you're a private lender or you want to be a private lender, put me in the chat box. I want to see who the private lenders are in the so-called room. Oh, look. Oh, golly. Tons of them. Tons of them. Danny, Selena, Michael, Mary Jo, they're coming on faster than I can even read the names. Ed, lots of private lenders. Okay. So a wrap mortgage can let you set up a situation where you like the loan, you like the borrower, but you don't have enough money to do the private loan. And literally, Bill's going to show you an example where he made a $250,000 private loan with a $100 investment. That's pretty cool, right? So let's get to it. What we're going to talk about tonight is what wrap mortgages are, because there are enough people who have heard of them, but they don't really get them. You know, like this seems like the hardest of the creative buying strategies or the deal structuring strategies for people to grasp. So we're going to talk about an easier way maybe for you to understand them than you've heard before, that you've studied before, why they're such good deal making tools, and why they're just one of the really powerful deal making tools. So you folks that Bill is so thrilled are here because you're like super power hitters, can just go take a little nap while we do this slide, because I'm talking now to the folks who are on the newer end of the real estate investor spectrum. I just want to make sure that we're totally clear on just what a mortgage and note is in the first place, okay? Because we talk about wrap mortgages and owner held mortgages and buying subject to the mortgage. When we use that language, we're almost always really talking about two documents. When we say I got a mortgage or I gave a mortgage, we're really talking about a document that is called a mortgage, and that is the security instrument. You know, we say, well, I paid my mortgage this month. That's really lazy language, because you never pay your mortgage. The mortgage is a security instrument. The mortgage is the document that says the lender gave you $100,000 to buy this property, and if you don't pay it back, then the property that is all detailed out here in this security instrument is going to get auctioned off by the lender so that he can get paid back. So the mortgage isn't a debt the way we talk about it, like it's a debt. I paid my mortgage, I've got my mortgage payment. It's not a debt, it's a security instrument. And it just simply says that the borrower or whoever made the promise that might have been made is pledging the property as security for the debt. And then the second document that we're kind of including but not saying is the note, and the note is the debt instrument. The note describes the repayment terms of that loan. So it's in the note that you'll find it's a $100,000 note. It's going to be paid back at 3% interest over the course of 30 years. And the payment on that's going to be $567. And it'll be payable at this address. So two very different documents. I'm gonna keep being lazy. I guarantee it. I'm gonna keep saying pay the mortgage, pay the mortgage, pay the mortgage. But of course, you're paying the note, and I just want to make sure everybody understands the whole scope of what we're talking about when we talk about wraparound mortgages or any other kind of mortgages. Now, there's another thing that we need to hit on, and this is another thing about interesting thing about teaching with Bill. Bill invests entirely in a deed of trust state. I invest entirely in mortgage states. And you don't need to know all the details right now about how those are super different. You do need to know whether you live in a deed of trust state or a mortgage state. You could just Google that and say, is Minnesota a title theory state or a lien theory state? Title theory states are the ones that have deeds of trust. Lien theory states are the ones that have mortgages, like Ohio and Kentucky and Indiana and Michigan and places like that. So the equivalent of a mortgage in a state that is a deed of trust state is the trust deed, and they're actually called slightly different things even in deed of trust states. Sometimes they're called trust deeds or deeds of trust, and that is the security instrument for the loan. So that's kind of the equivalent of a mortgage in a deed of trust state, and those are also always accompanied by a note that describes the repayment terms. So I said first thing off that wrap mortgages are also called all-inclusive trust deeds. That's because in some states mortgages are used, and in some states deeds of trust are used. They work really similarly. The wraps work really similarly in deed of trust states and in mortgage states. And I am going to consistently forget to say wrap mortgage and or deed of trust. So just here, if you're in a deed of trust state, when you hear me say wrap mortgage, you hear all-inclusive deed of trust. And I know there's going to be some questions coming up going, which one should I use? Should I use a mortgage or a deed of trust? The answer is, it doesn't matter what you want. You're going to use the one that's used in your state. So we got people from all over the country here. Y'all can figure out what states you live in and whether you would be using a wrap mortgage or an all-inclusive deed of trust. So a wrap mortgage, now that we've kind of talked about what a mortgage is, a wrap mortgage is just a form of a mortgage. There's lots of forms of mortgages, right? There's a mortgage or a deed of trust that describes and pledges the property that's being used for security. For the note, which describes the repayment terms. When you look at a document that is a wrap mortgage, it looks mostly like 90% like any other mortgage you would ever see in your state. There's a little bit of extra language that we'll talk about as we proceed through the explanation here. But it's just, don't be scared of it because there's the word wrap in front of it. It's still just a mortgage. Now it happens that this kind of mortgage is one that you're only going to see in either a seller finance deal or in some kind of private loan situation. So you're only going to see these used where the seller has agreed to carry payments for you, or where there's a private lender involved in the deal in some way. They are not new. They've been around forever and ever. I couldn't tell you the whole history of them, but I know my dad was using them as early as the 1960s. And that kind of begs the question, if they're just a mortgage with some extra wording and people have been using them for years and years and years, why are they not better understood? Like why is it so hard for them to be explained to people and then people to actually understand them well enough to go out and use them? The answer to that question is, I don't know why they're so hard, because every single one of you, if you have been around real estate education, REIA associations for any length of time, and I'm talking about like if you've been around for more than 4 or 5 months, you have heard of and understand the idea of wrapping things that aren't mortgages. So, quick example. Everybody knows there's such a thing as a lease, right? You've heard of leases. You probably even signed one at some point in your life. In a lease, there are two parties. There's the tenant who wants to live in a property in exchange for a monthly rent. Now, we're going to call our tenant Tommy, and we're going to say that his monthly rent is $1,200 a month. And the second party to a lease is, of course, the person who owns the property, who we call a rental housing provider. And he's got this house that he doesn't live in that he would love to exchange to a good paying Tommy tenant for a monthly payment of $1,200 a month. He wants to exchange the right to occupy that house for $1,200 a month. That's a lease. That's how it works, right? So the third piece of this, we've got our tenant and we've got our rental housing provider. The third piece is the lease. And the lease just outlines what the tenant will and won't do and what the housing provider will and won't do. And it's just the way of writing down, memorializing, as it's called, what everybody has already agreed to. So there's a lease, Tommy signs it, housing provider signs it, and things hopefully proceed with no problem for then on out for the term of the lease. But are you aware that sometimes in the middle of all of this, something happens? The lease is still going on. Nothing's changed on the part of the housing provider, but something has changed with Tommy. So for instance, he might get a 6-month internship in Paris. He might get a chance to go out to California and train at the main headquarters of the company for 6 months. Something happens where even though he is still obligated to the terms of that lease, he's not going to take advantage of the terms of the lease because he's not going to live there for that 6 months. And oftentimes this causes some problems for Tommy because he realizes that he can't afford the apartment that he's got rented in Cincinnati but isn't going to be living in for 6 months, and also his apartment in Paris where he is going to be living for the next 6 months. Maybe he doesn't really want to let go of that apartment in Cincinnati because he really likes it and he really likes his housing provider, and he plans to come back in the fall and his lease will still be in effect in the fall. So Tommy might have a thought like, well, Spike, who used to always win at quarters when we were in the frat together, told me that he needs a place to live. And I'm not going to be living in my place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new lease agreement with my friend Spike. And this new lease agreement is, it's probably not going to be in writing in real life, but it probably should be in writing real life. But it's an agreement. It might be an informal agreement, but it's an agreement with his fraternity brother Spike, who, as the potential housing provider in this situation, I assume to be not the tenant that I would have put into the property. Spike's probably a great guy. I always look at this sort of situation from the housing provider's perspective with a bit of a jaundiced eye. So this new lease agreement between Tommy and Spike is, hey, Spike, you're going to pay me $1,200 a month to live in the property that I have the right to possess and occupy. I am in turn going to pay that $1,200 to my housing provider. So you're going to give me $1,200. I'm going to give the landlord $1,200. Oops, I said it. I'm going to give the housing provider $1,200, and you'll get to live here for 6 months, but then you're going to move out and I get to move back in. So you guys are aware that there's such a thing as this, right? You've seen it or heard of it or done it, maybe even. So what happens here is that there are two separate leases covering the same apartment. One is between Tommy the tenant and the property owner. That's the first lease. The second one is between Spike and Tommy. They both exist at the same time. There's two agreements that convey the same set of rights happening at the same time. And in this case, the terms are slightly different. Tommy's lease with the housing provider is a year. Spike's lease with Tommy is only 6 months. So two agreements on the same unit that don't mirror each other exactly. And so the way this looks in terms of like legalities and practicalities is that the lease that Tommy had with his property owner is completely unchanged. The fact that he let somebody else move in does not make it not his responsibility to fulfill his lease, right? He is still responsible for paying the rent every month. He is still responsible for keeping the property in undamaged condition. So when Spike doesn't pay Tommy, Tommy doesn't get to call his housing provider and say, so I'm not giving you the rent this month because this guy Spike, who you don't even know, didn't pay me. That's not going to fly. Spike did not assume Tommy's lease, and he wasn't assigned Tommy's lease, and he has no rights or responsibilities under Tommy's lease. He doesn't owe rent to the property owner. He doesn't have to follow any of the other terms and conditions of Tommy's lease unless those are duplicated in his lease with Tommy. So Tommy's lease better say, hey, Spike, you're not going to damage anything, and if you do, you're financially responsible for it. So the one agreement between Tommy and the property owner governs that relationship, and the other agreement between Spike and Tommy governs that relationship, and there's absolutely no legal relationship between Spike and the property owner. Bear with me here. This does help you understand wrap mortgages. So yes, for the protection of Spike, the lease that Tommy and Spike have should really specify that Tommy's going to keep up his agreement with the property owner, because what happens if Tommy doesn't pay the rent to the property owner? I mean, the answer is he still has his legal obligation. So if Tommy takes Spike's rent and just pockets it, the property owner has every right to evict Tommy and anyone else who might be living in that unit. And on the reverse, if the sink breaks and Spike calls the property owner and says, hey, your sink's broken, come fix it, the property owner does actually have to fix it because that's one of his legal responsibilities. If Spike damages the unit, it's Tommy who has to pay for it. Tommy has to collect from Spike. The property owner is going to collect from Tommy. So, sorry, this is an extra, oh, yep, back up. So, if you think about this a little deeper, because this is one of the things that really confuses people about wrap mortgages. There are two agreements. Each one calls for $2,400 in rent. There's one that says Spike has to pay Tommy $1,200, and there's one that says Tommy has to pay the owner for $1,200, and $1,200 plus $1,200 is $2,400. Is this now a $2,400 a month rental? No, because the money that Spike is paying Tommy is going to the property owner. Yes, there are two separate agreements with two separate sets of parties, but the agreement between Spike and Tommy for the $1,200 includes the agreement, the financial agreement between Tommy and the housing provider. Spike isn't thinking, oh, well, I'm going to give Tommy $1,200 and then I'm also going to give the property owner $1,200. He's thinking my $1,200 covers all the financial obligations on this apartment. Does this ever happen? Tommy discovers that short-term rentals go for more than long-term rentals. Short-term rentals over the summer in this city are $1,600 a month. And so he charges Spike $1,600 instead of $1,200. You know where that happens a lot? In places where there's rent control. In places where the government has said, hey, Mr. Housing Provider, you can never charge Tommy more than $1,200 a month, no matter how long he lives there. And Tommy's lived there for 15 years and rents are now $4,000 in that area. Tommy might very well sublease it to somebody else, because what happens is that Tommy's lease with the property owner is for $1,200 a month for 12 months. But Spike's lease with Tommy is for $1,600 a month for 6 of those 12 months. And where does that extra $400 go? I mean, Tommy's taking in $1,600, he only has to pay out $1,200. I think it's pretty obvious that it's going into Tommy's pocket. That whole thing is called subleasing, right? I mean, you've heard of it many, many times. It's called subleasing, but another way to say it is it's a lease with a wraparound lease. That second lease is a wraparound lease. The second agreement on the same property that has different terms is the wraparound. It's between a guy who happens to have some rights to the property, the tenant has the right to possess and occupy the property, and another person out here who is not at all party to that original lease. So in example 2, where Tommy's charging $1,600, he's taking advantage of something that we call spread. There's a spread between the terms that he agreed to pay and the terms that he's able to get. And don't be all hating on Tommy here. Don't be all, but it's wrong because the housing provider has the right to screen his tenants and bad stuff. You realize that most of the money made in long-term real estate investing is made on spread. And there's other examples of this that you have heard of. It's common in the real estate world to wrap one agreement around another agreement. So have you ever heard of this? The investor goes out and lease options a property. He gets a lease with an option to buy from, who cares who it is, some property owner somewhere. And the agreement he makes is, I will eventually pay you $150,000. Right now I'm paying you $0, but I'm also agreeing to pay you $1,000 a month in rent. And then what does the investor do? Does he go, yay, I made a creative deal, and then just put that agreement in his file drawer and keep it there so he can look at it and be proud? No, of course not. The standard exit strategy for that is he finds a homeowner, a tenant buyer, who loves that house and wants to live there, and who will give him an agreement to pay $175 eventually, with $10,000 now and $1,500 a month rent. There are 2 different leases and options on that same property. Y'all cool with that? That doesn't bother you, right? You're not having some conniption fit in your living room going, there can't be 2 leases and 2 options on the same property. Of course there can. Each one has different parties. Each one has different terms. And the way the investor is making money here, I think, is pretty obvious. Well, let's see, I paid $0 down, I got $10,000 down. I agreed to pay $150, my buyer agreed to pay me $175. I'm paying $1,000 a month and I'm getting $1,500 a month. And I am really sorry to do this, but something is happening in my house that I have to make stop. Babe, the buddy is trying to climb the stairs. I have a dog with a pulled tendon who's not supposed to be moving around at all, and he's trying to climb stairs right now. I'm sorry.
He fell off a
This
thimble.
this this strategy is called a sandwich lease option. If you've heard of a sandwich lease option, just put a Y in the chat. I want to see Y's if you've heard of a sandwich lease option. Okay, good, lots of Y's. Okay, so there is nothing that bothers you about the idea of having two of the same contract with different terms on the same property. We just got like, it went up so high that it's not even counting them anymore in my chat box. There were over 70 people who said that they had heard of these. Here's another one that's gotten really common lately. So an investor leases a property from a housing provider, and let's just make up numbers and say it's $1,500 a month. And then he puts furniture in that property. And then what does he do? Come on, I know you've seen this. Why would I furnish a property? Yep, Airbnb, you got it. Sandra, Dave, Amy, Stacy, Candace, Tom, you all got it. The investor turns the property into an Airbnb. It's not even his house, he's just leasing it. And he turns it into an Airbnb, and he rents it for $100 a night to travelers. Can he do that? Sure, it's legal. It's, yeah, obviously he's gonna get the agreement of the housing provider. He's making so much money on that though. How could it possibly be legal? Well, willing housing provider, willing investor, willing travelers. That's how. This is commonly called arbitraging Airbnb, but another way to say it is it's a wrap Airbnb. There's one underlying agreement here that's a lease, and there's a second agreement that's happening over here, which is a nightly type of lease. So you're already aware, whether you knew it or not, that two agreements on the same kind can exist at the same time on the same property. You're already aware that those two contracts could have two different parties, and they can have different terms, and that the existence of the second contract doesn't change the terms of the first contract. So what is so hard to understand about this when we apply it to mortgages? Because that's all a wrap mortgage is. The seller has a property. It's subject to a mortgage and a note already. Now, probably, 99% of the time, that mortgage and the note is going to be with a bank. The bank is going to be the recipient of the payments, and the bank is going to hold that mortgage for security. The seller then does something a little unusual, which is he sells the property and he carries back a new mortgage and note, which is an additional mortgage and note. It is, the other one is still there, but now there's a new one, the wrap mortgage, on the same property. And the wrap probably has different terms than the first mortgage, and the seller is the recipient of the payments and the security instrument in the second mortgage, which is the wrap mortgage. So there's a mortgage now that says seller gets X, there's a note now that says seller gets X dollars a month at Y% interest for Z months. And there's also a mortgage that says, and if you don't pay the seller can auction off the property to get paid back. Now, I think this right here is the thing that discombobulates people about wrap mortgages. How can the same property be pledged for security to both the bank and the seller? How can I have one property and say, hey, bank, you can have it if I don't pay you, and also have this other mortgage over here with another person that says, hey, seller, you can have it if I don't pay you? Come on. You guys know better than that. Is there such a thing as a first mortgage and a second mortgage? Have you ever had both a first mortgage and a home equity line of credit on the same property? Were they two different lenders? Then you already pledged the same property to two different lenders for payments on a loan. And if you think about it, you know how that works. If you stop paying the mortgage, if you stop paying either one, either mortgagee can foreclose, but the one in first position gets paid first out of the foreclosure proceeds. I think these are much easier to understand if you compare them to things you already know and understand. So let's walk through an example of how this thing works with two notes, two mortgages, different parties in each one. And you get to see the only naked picture of me you are ever going to see in your entire life. I'm looking at the Zoom dashboard to see if anybody who had that little I'm not paying attention icon is now looking at the screen. So it's 1989. I am a brand new baby investor with no cash and bad credit, just out of college, lots of credit card debt, no money to speak of. But I want to buy a house to live in because I grew up in a real estate family. Some of you probably knew my father, Clarence Jones, who was a fairly, big time small investor here in the greater Cincinnati area, taught some classes back in the day. So I understood from a very young age that it was better to be the owner than the renter. And I was determined, even with my bad credit and so on, that I was going to stop paying rent and I was going to go buy a house. Clarence, my father, happened to have a vacant rental house at that time that I kind of liked. I should say I was working for my dad at this stage of my life, worked for him for about 2 years. So I got the up close and personal on all of the vacant rental houses because I was the one who had to go and clean them out and take pictures and do all the things that you do to get a rental ready. And there was this one house that I thought was like really the right size for me and my husband, kind of small, but lots of charm, brick. I liked that house. And I knew that my father had, I'm sorry, I just tried to close the chat box and I opened it all the way up. He'd bought the house for $28,000. He had a $22,000 mortgage on it at a 7.5% rate, and that his PITI payments on it were $299 a month. I also knew that this was not his favorite rental house. It was kind of far from his house. He had had a lot of turnover in it, and at this point it needed a fairly big, turnover to get it rented again. So he had talked about selling it, and he was talking about like a $38,000 as is price. So that, okay. And I want to remind you folks of two things. Number one, I live in Cincinnati, Ohio. And number two, this was 1989. And I'm using the real numbers from the deal. This house today is probably a $125,000 house. So the problem was, as Pete would say, I was like $37,500 short of being able to buy that house for cash. No bank was going to make me a loan, especially not with my $500 down that I had. So I girded up and I went into negotiation with my father. Now, if anybody out there ever did business with my father, you know why you would have to gird up to negotiate with him, because he was always 10 times smarter than everybody else and very willing to be more creative than anybody else was willing to be. So I went to him and I said, I'll buy the house on Griselli for $38,000, but I need you to, exercise your creative muscles with me. I'll give you $500 down. I'll assume your first mortgage, which is $22,000 and has 19 years remaining. I'll give you a second mortgage for the balance, which is 15.5, also at 7.5% interest, but I'm going to need that one to be 30 years because I need to keep the payment kind of low. And that'll make my whole payment $407 a month. And you don't pay me anything, but you also know I can make a $407 a month payment from what you do pay me. So if I were drawing a T-bar like Bill and Pete and those guys like to do, I would have said to my dad, okay, so where you are right now is you have a vacant rental that you don't really like and that needs work. And it's costing you $299 a month to own it as it sits there vacant. And you haven't had any income for 6 weeks, and you're not going to have any income for another 6 or 8 weeks until you get it turned over. But if you take my offer, you'll have a buyer who will live there, who will do the work, who will make that $299 a month payment, and also give you extra money. I give you $107 every month for the next 30 years, and you'll have zero expenses on that. No taxes, no insurance, no maintenance, no vacancy, no nothing. Doesn't that sound better? I was real proud of myself about that. What is the structure that I suggested to him called? There's a name for that thing where you take over somebody's mortgage and give them the rest. Okay, y'all got it half right. I'm seeing a lot of people saying subject to, and that's the part about taking over his loan, but there was something else to it. Okay, yes, wraparound mortgage is correct, but that's just, or sorry, seller financing is correct, but that's just a general name for it. Oh, come on, guys. You've seen this structure a million times. Yes, okay. So it was a subject to deal and a second mortgage. Two separate things. I'm going to buy the property subject to, and then we're going to do the equity as a second mortgage. That's what that is called. Why would a seller not love that idea? Why would the seller not love the idea of me taking over his first mortgage and then giving him a second mortgage? Any idea? Okay, well, yeah, their mortgage is in second position. That's sort of a thing. My low cash down is not a big selling point, maybe. Yeah, somebody just got it. Dad Clarence, not sure baby Vina will pay the first mortgage. That is correct and well put. Thank you. Did I mention I had bad credit and he wasn't really paying me very much money and I was really young? And is that like super exciting to you that you would sign your deed over to somebody like that and just trust them to make the payments? Because what if they don't make the payments? Yeah, Tiffany's right. High chance of default. That's exactly right. So yeah, he wasn't comfortable with the idea that I make his payments. And there are a lot of sellers like that. So let me show you how to fix it for sellers like that. My dad countered me. Now, a lot of you have dads that would just be like, oh, honey, I'll help you. I'll co-sign on a mortgage with you. We'll get you a better house than this one that doesn't need work. Tell me what I can do for you, honey. That wasn't my dad. My dad made me a counteroffer. And the counteroffer was, you can buy my house for $38,500 and with $500 down, but I'm not going to let you assume the mortgage. I'm going to keep paying that mortgage. What you're going to do is you're going to get a new mortgage that's payable to me for the entire balance. I'm going to carry back the entire balance, $38,000. And the good news is that'll be a 30-year term. We'll spread those payments out over a long time. We'll give you a lower loan constant. Did you hear that, Pete? I said loan constant. Still not 100% sure what it means, but I said the words. However, says my father to me, bank interest rates are 12%, which was true. Go look it up. In 1989, bank interest rates were 12%. The reason he was paying 7.5% was his mortgage was old. And further he saith unto me, You can't even qualify for a bank loan, so you're a high risk borrower, so your interest rate's going to be 14% like I charge all of my other high risk borrowers. Yep. And if he were alive today and you said, why'd you do that to your daughter? His answer would be, well, I mean, she was going to inherit all that money anyway. That was kind of dad logic right there. So he did the math on this and he said, your payment's going to be 204 or 504 a month, which you can well afford because I pay you generous, copious amounts of money for what you do for me. And I know that you can pay that. So under his suggestion, his T-bar looked like this. Current position, vacant rental that needs work. Clarence worried that Vina can't or won't pay the underlying mortgage payment, but still Clarence has no income from the house. Clarence's new position, buyer who will live there and do work. Clarence stays responsible for the $299, but he gets payment of $504 every month, which covers that, which means he has $206 a month in positive cash flow with zero expenses. Well, there wasn't much I could do about that except agree to it because it was more important to me to stop paying $600 a month rent where I was, get a bigger place that I owned myself, be able to build some equity into it, and so on. What is the structure that he suggested and that we ended up going with called? One big mortgage of $38,000 that includes the balance on the underlying mortgage of $22,000. Yep, y'all got it this time. That is a wrap, so they say. Why did he like the wrap better than he liked my suggestion? There's actually two reasons, and we already talked about one, which is I don't have to worry about Vina paying the mortgage because I'm just going to pay it myself, my mortgage to my bank. But what's the other reason? Anybody catch that? Yep, control kept, he didn't keep the title. No. He didn't keep the title. I got the title because when somebody carries back a mortgage, it is assumed that somebody else has gotten the title. And yeah, we're getting around to it. I'm seeing a lot of 14% extra cash flow. Okay, it's a little bit deeper than that. Yes, it was more profitable for him overall, but here's exactly how it worked. I got the title to the property. The first mortgage, which was the bank mortgage and note, stayed right where it was. Nobody even called the bank and said, we're doing this. The mortgage stayed recorded. The payments kept going to the bank. The new wrap mortgage was also recorded. So now there's an additional mortgage, a second mortgage for $38,000 at 14% interest. This is why he liked it. He got 14% interest on the $16,000 in equity that he turned over to me. In other words, he owes 22, I'm paying 38, there's $16,000 difference there. And he was getting 14% on that plus principal payback. But listen, this is important. He was also getting interest on the money he didn't have in it, wasn't he? I mean, the bank really has financed the first $22,000 of this deal. At what interest rate? 7.5. So he was charging me 14% interest, which means he was getting 14% on the $16,000 in equity and also effectively getting 6.5% on the bank's $22,000. He didn't have that money in there, the bank did, and I was paying 14% on the whole amount. Yeah, it's rate arbitrage, that's right. And I'm seeing an occasional question pop up amongst the responses here, and I want you guys to write down your questions because, as I said, we're going to try and get through all of this by 8:30 and then answer questions after that. This right here, that example I just gave you, is the traditional use of wraparound mortgages. The ability to give sellers a higher interest rate than the rate on their underlying loan is how these things kind of first came to my attention, and how I saw them used a lot in the early years that I was doing deals. The thing is, that's mostly a popular thing in a rising interest rate environment. And we haven't seen a rising interest rate environment in quite a while. So that might beg the question, are they still relevant at all? And the answer is, of course they are. Why would we spend all this time preparing this class and these instructions if it was like, so wait for a rising interest rate environment and then you can use second mortgages? I want to share an offer that I made last week. You ready? This is a $400,000 house fixed up. That's kind of an expensive house for my area. It's not 100% ready. It needs about $25,000 worth of work to get it into that kind of shape, but the seller wants $300,000 for it. Woohoo! The seller situation is she is divorcing. There is this weird, complicated situation where the husband owes her money, and they've agreed to trade his debt for him signing over the house to her, but he wants $10,000 out of that to balance it out. It's a weird situation, but she's open to whatever will fix this for her, because she is not able to make the payments on her small balance mortgage. Now it's a small balance, but the interest, the payments are $1079 a month. Well, how in the world does a $65,000 mortgage have a $1079 a month payment? It wasn't a $65,000 mortgage when she started. It was a $200,000 mortgage when she started, and she's still making payments on that initial balance, of course. The good news is there's only 70 of those payments left. So my offer to her was, I will give you the $300,000 you want. I will give you $10,000 down so that you can pay off and be rid of the ex-husband that you're struggling with. And you will carry the rest, which is $290,000 at 3% interest for 20 years. Why 3%? Well, that's what banks are charging, right? I mean, are you happy with getting what banks are charging? Seems like most people would be happy with getting what banks are charging. That means, Ms. Seller, that you will receive payments from me of $1,604 a month plus taxes and insurance. I'm leaving that out of this calculation just to show the principal and interest part, because tax and insurance are a wash. I pay them to her, she pays them to the bank pays them to the tax and insurance people. However, you'll still need to make the payments on that underlying loan. I'm going to give you $1,604 a month. I need you to use that in part to make the payments on the underlying loan, which means for the next 70 months, you're going to get $500 a month to put in your pocket. But after the 70 months is over and your bank loan is paid off, then you get $1,064 a month for the next 14 plus years. So does that sound good at all? A T-bar would look like this. She has a vacant house that needs work that she can't afford to do. She's locked in this weird years-long combat with this ex-husband. She's got a 1079 payment that she really can't afford. She's renting a place on the other side of town, and my guess is when we get down to it, we're going to find out that she's a payment behind on that mortgage, and she's going through all this. She's just in a really bad place emotionally. If you take my offer, Ms. Seller, you're going to have a buyer who's going to live there and do work. Yes, my intention is to move into this house. I don't even really like this house that much. I like the house I live in right now better. So why in the world would I move into this house? Anybody know? Yeah, Ari knew. Because if I move into it and I live in it for 2 years and then I sell it for what I assume in 2 years will be a $425,000 price, I don't have to pay taxes on the $100,000. If I flip it right now, if I put 25 in it and sell it for 400 and make 75,000, I'm going to pay a bunch of that out in taxes. I would move for 2 years to be able to get $100 or $125,000 with no tax. The $10,000 is going to buy the ex-husband out, and then all of the payments will go to the seller. She'll get income that will cover her payment and give her $500 more for the next 70 months, and then even more than that after that. So basically, instead of emotional turmoil, it's over. She gets peace and she gets checks. That's the biggest benefit for her, and the reason that she's seriously considering this offer. Now, there were other ways to structure this. You guys have been around for a while. You're thinking, well, why didn't you just lease option it from her and just pay her the 1604 that way? Well, I already told you my goal is to do a 121 deal on it, so I kind of need to own it. I mean, I know there's ways to get around that, but it's complicated. Also, I don't really like putting big amounts of repairs into a house that I don't have title to. If she ever declared bankruptcy while I was in the lease option, which she may end up doing, the bankruptcy court would probably void my lease option and just say, sorry, bye-bye, the bank gets the house and never mind your 25,000 that you put into it. Land contract has the same problem. I mean, land contract would be another option, but it's got the same problem. I don't have title to the property if I'm on a land contract. I could get the same effect by buying it subject to her first and giving her a second, but to get the same payment, the second would have to be a 0% second. And I did float that idea to her, and she said, I used to be a mortgage broker back in the boom times, and I know that there's no such thing as a 0% mortgage. And I said, oh, okay. In my head, I said, okay, she's used to seeing bank rates, so she would be happier with a bank rate. So how do I arrange this so that she gets the bank rate she wants and I get the payment I want? And the answer was 3% loan. The wrap worked best for her, and you're going to find that if you're trying to sell creatively, it's probably going to work best for you too. I'm going to show you an example of a deal I'm doing right now where I used a wrap to sell a house. And if you are a wholesaler, I want you to pay very careful attention to this example because it should tell you something important, which is that wraps are a way for you to ethically put together a subject to deal with a seller and then sell it to a buyer for a higher price than you could get for cash. And the wrap part of that is really important because if you're a wholesaler and you're thinking about flipping a creative deal, you have to stay in the middle. You have to stay responsible for the payments you agreed to make, and the wraps will let you do that. So actually, I got an offer on this house this week, and it was through a real estate agent from a rehabber. The offer was for $93,000 cash, and along with the offer and the agency disclosure and all that sort of stuff, there was a pre-qualification letter from the rehabber's bank, which I like to see. But as I looked at it, it said that the terms of the loan that this bank was going to give these rehabbers was 25% down plus loan costs, which I kind of just mentally calculated as that's going to be between the appraisal, application fee, all the points, all that stuff. It's probably going to actually end up being 30% down. And the loan is at 5% interest, which is actually a pretty good interest rate for a rehab property. The problem was I don't want 93 for this house. I want 95 for this house. Like I was asking an even higher price, but my bottom line was really 95. So I countered the offer. I sent the agent an email and it said, I will sell this house for $95,000 cash. Or I will sell this house for $99,000 and your buyer can put down 10% instead of 25. I'm going to want 6% instead of 5%, but what difference does that really make if they're only going to have the loan for 6 months? I will charge your or your buyer no application fees, no appraisal fees, no points, no prepayment penalty, none of that stuff. And I'll give them 12 months to fix it up and pay me back. That was actually the very first time I countered a cash offer through an agent with a creative offer back to the agent, because there was no mention of hey, can you finance this for us in the offer. It was a cash offer, but I looked at their loan terms and I went, that's gotta hurt, man. 25% down and points and closing costs, and I have to come up with my own repair costs. So if I were making a T-bar, I didn't make a T-bar because I never actually saw any of these people. I would say that the buyer, what the buyer had planned was that they would offer $93,000, which has a problem built into it, which is at $93,000, I'm not selling the deal. They then had in their plan to put, by my calculation, about $28,000 in cash into the deal for down payment, loan costs, all that. And on top of that, the repair costs. Under my proposal, they would pay $99,000 for the deal, which was, $6,000 more, 7.5% more than what they had intended to pay, but with only $10,000 in down payment, no loan costs, and then their same repair costs. They would still have to do their own repair costs. So I don't know, that looks pretty good to me. What do you think? I mean, they'd be saving 5% of that 93,000 probably just in loan costs that they didn't have to pay. I would rather have that in my pocket than the bank's pocket. So looked okay to me, and it looked okay to them too, because they didn't even respond to the $95,000 cash counter. They went straight to the $99,000 financing counter. This all happened on Saturday, and thanks to a really awesome agent who happens to be a RIA member and understood the deal and knew how to explain it to the buyer and had all the paperwork right there. Thank you, Felicia, if you happen to be on the call. We're closing on Friday. You like that deal? Yeah, I know it's better for the buyer. Is it also better for me? Yeah, I got a whole bunch more money for the property, and I'm only getting 6% interest, but they're going to pay it all off in 4 or 5 months anyway. So guess what the problem was? This property isn't paid off. I have a $64,000 mortgage on this property. So what are we going to do about that? Well, my $64,000 mortgage is at 3.75% interest. I'm not going to let somebody take that over. I'm going to wrap it. At 6%. So I'm getting 2.25% on money that I don't even have in the deal. That first $64,000 worth of debt, I'm collecting money from them, I'm paying the bank, and I'm keeping a little bit. I like that. Do you like that? I like that. Okay, I hope you guys are all getting oriented toward this. I hope you guys are all saying, okay, I get it, wrap mortgage, two security instruments on the same property to different lenders. Okay, yeah, I'm sort of, yeah, I'm cool with this so far, because you're about to get your head blown off. Are you ready for the thing that all the lenders came here to hear, which is, how do you take $100 and turn it into a $250,000 loan? Because here we go.
Okay, so let's talk. And this has been a great program, and I'm hoping everybody's understanding wraps a lot better than you did at 7 o'clock tonight. If you are in the chat room, can you just say whether you say yes or no? Are you understanding them better than you did before? That's great.
Yes, 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 yes,
So,
yes, 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 yes.
Vina and I have both been doing this for about 30 years each. And in our teaching, what we want to do is pass on the lessons we've learned. So, a couple things. First is, I know a lot of the listeners here are from the Ohio area, and we also have Carla Kuhn on the call. So all I have to say is roll tide.
Ugh, I knew that was
Roll
coming.
Tide. Yeah,
Oh,
I know. It's Roll Tide, baby. Just to let you know, SEC, it was a really great game, didn't you think? But anyway, I had to start there. Second thing is, also on the call, you have Pete Fortunato. So in my case, anything you hear coming out of me, I had really great teachers in Pete and Jack Miller and in Dykes Boddiford. And they played a big role in me knowing how to use wraps and learning them. And I listened to them teach them for a while, probably for about a year or two before I even attempted my first one. But I know
you
that.
know what my dad used to call Pete?
What?
The young one.
The young one?
Yeah, because he hung out with, Jack and John and Jimmy, and then Pete was the young one.
He was the young one. He was the young one. And
Pete's a
anyway,
young buck. He was like 18 years younger than Jack.
yes. Well, I took my first Pete class in 1999, and in that class, that's when I first really kind of became aware of wraps. But it took me about, not no pun intended, but it took me about 2 years to wrap my mind around wraps. But then I started getting a hold of it, and we started using them. And when I used it, I was using my money. In other words, if someone needed to borrow $200,000 or 100,000, back then it was $100,000, we used all of our money. I wasn't going in with anybody else. It was just my 100,000. And that's kind of how we did our deals for a long time. And then about 2012, 2013, there's another girl in this call. Her name is Dorsey Bodiford. And Dorsey she's just a very talented investor. But she had a smaller Roth, and I started watching her use $1,000, $3,000, $5,000 out of her retirement account and wrapping other people's $80,000, $90,000 loans. She was putting it together. She was finding the loans. She was bringing them together. And I just started calling these Dorsey deals. So when you see us use small dollars wrapping big dollars, and the loan you're about to see is a case of that, I call them Dorsey deals after Dorsey. But she has a really good book out um, called Wrapping for Profits. If you go to assets101.com, you'll see it there. But I'm very grateful to watching her because again, I learned a lot from her. And the other thing is, you're going to watch me use a retirement accounts that when I'm lending from, in this case, this is one of those. And we also have Larissa on the call with Advanta and Advanta IRA. And that's who we use that's where we have our RAs parked, and just a really great person to work with. So let's move forward on this. And I want you to know that when this deal was done, got started, I got a phone call from a friend of mine, but I don't do commercial buildings, or didn't at the time. Um, can you back up one slide, Vina? Thank you. So anyway, I didn't do commercial buildings, and this was a 10,000 square foot warehouse. And my friend who called me, who was seeking a $250,000 loan to be able to buy this, asked me about what was going on. So I told him, I said, I'm not your guy. I'll help put you in contact with the people. I'll help you. I'll give you my opinion of what's going on and a good way to structure it. But I didn't see us being involved in this because I'm not a commercial guy. And when I pulled up, what this business was is they had nuts and bolts for the carpet industry in North Georgia. So that's, it wasn't Home Depot stuff. It was great big nuts and bolts and everything else. And on the side, when I pulled into the parking lot, they had a big sign on the side of the house, and you're looking at it there. It says it's a house of a million screws. And I saw that, and I had a very good friend of mine. Well, I'm going to go ahead and use his name, Dykes Boddiford. And I knew I wanted to be in this deal with Dykes Boddiford. I wanted to be in the million screws deal with Dykes. And that's kind of how this thing got started. So when I saw this, I looked at Ned and said, yes. So here was Ned's situation. He called me up and he said, I need $250,000. And kind of the story behind this warehouse was it was worth about $450,000. And he was going to be able to buy it for $350,000. So right there was about $100,000 in equity. and it also included all the hardware, all the inventory in the building. And my friend was going to put down $100,000. So that meant he needed a loan of 250. So that was going to be a very, very safe deal. And with all that amount of equity, one of the questions you have is, if you're a lender, would you want to do this loan? Just looking at this, would you say, hey, is this a safe loan for you to do? And when I talked to my friend and said, what are you, and his name here is Billy. So when I say my friend Billy, I said, what are you willing to give in order to get this loan? And we talked a little bit, and he was comfortable at 10% interest. And he was also comfortable at paying 1 point on the $250,000 loan. So that would be $2,500. A point is 1% of the loan. So in your calculator, if it's a $100,000 loan times 1%, $1,000. In this case, it was $250,000. And we kind of talked about how long the payments would be based on a note of how long. And when we looked at that, we figured 20 years was the time it took to get, 20 years at 10% interest would give payments of 24, 26, 43. And he was comfortable with those payments. He needed something less than $3,000. So I was able to bring him down about $600 below his $3,000 mark, which made it safe for him. So if you're able to get these terms on a note where there's $200,000, really almost $300,000 in equity in the property, would you do this deal? Who would say yes? Who would do this deal?
Me.
Hey,
Kevin, there's something wrong with the motorhome. So I was excited by this. Now let's talk about a problem that a lot of people who have IRAs, self-directed IRAs, have. And when I talk to people, a lot of times they have less than $30,000 in their retirement, their IRA self-direct, which means if someone comes to them and says, I need a $100,000 or $150,000 loan, that person who has the IRA goes, well, that doesn't work for me. I need to find something else. And the thing I want you to take away from this deal is understand, as long as you have something in your IRA, if you can be the middleman or woman, if you can be the one who is making it rain, making this deal come together, you can cut yourself into it for very small dollars. So in this case, the account that I wanted to use was a self-direct, and it had $400 in that account. That was it, $400. Remember, my friend Billy needed to get a $250,000 loan. So I want you to watch how I can use an account that only has $400 and be able to put this together and still have $300 left in the account. So people always ask, why should you go to a RIA meeting? Why go on the Zoom calls? Why have a big network of real estate investing friends? And the answer is, you're always trying to find out what people need. And I think probably the best person at this I've ever seen is Pete Fortunato. He knows what everybody has, knows what's going on. He can pull from over here and bring it back over here. He's just phenomenal in what he does. And I've learned from that. So in talking to some friends of mine, I had one friend, and I've already told you his name. His name was Dyke Spotiford, and we'd had lunch a little bit before that. And in talking to him, I found out that he had $220,000 sitting in an account, one of his investment accounts, and it was just sitting there getting no interest. And he said, hey, if you come across some place to put it, let me know. And I asked him a real simple question. I said, what would you need to earn on your money? And he said, well, if I could get 9%, I'd be really happy. And he didn't need any points, just need to get this money working. And so with my friend who was going to borrow the money, he had agreed to 10%, 1 point, a $250,000 loan, 20-year amortization with a 5-year balloon. And so when you look at the note, the loan that Dice was going to make, it mirrored that, except for it wasn't 10%, it was 9%. And so that made Dice's payments on the $220,000 loan he would make, it would make his payments $1,989.65. So that was going to be good. I had also talked to another friend of mine, and he had recently opened up an IRA, a Roth account. It was self-direct, and he hadn't done anything in it. And the problem is he was getting feed every month. So he wasn't with Advanta, he was with someone else, and they were doing fees on him each and every month. And his account was getting smaller and smaller, and he just needed a place to put his money. So in this case, he had $29,900 in that account. And I said, well, what do you need? What type of interest rate do you want to get? In his case, he said, if I can get 8%, I'd be thrilled. And so same thing, it was a 20-year amortization at a 5-year balloon, and his payments would be $251.25. So now I have two friends, and if you total the money up, all together, they had $249,900. So there were there's $100 missing to give my friend Billy the full amount he needed to be able to buy the building. So I had $400 in my retirement account, so I could take, or the self-direct account, and I took $100 of it, and now there's the full $250. So this is kind of when I sat down and talked to him, I said, this would be unusual. This is going to be the borrower. I said, this is going to be unusual how we're going to do this. But I said, are you really comfortable? $250,000, 10%, 1 point, 20-year AM, 5-year balloon with the payments that we gave you. And he said, yeah, I'm real comfortable with that. I said, okay, we're going to do this different. Here's how we're going to do it. So first off, when we went to closing, he signed a first mortgage. First mortgage being this would be recorded in first position against this property. And that was going to be Dykes's note of $220,000, 9%, with payments of $1,989. So that note was signed, and in Georgia, we use a security deed, a deed of trust, to secure the note to the property. You heard Vina talk about that earlier in the program. So that got secured to the property. Next, Billy signed another note to my second friend, and in that case is for $29,900 at 8%. But again, all the terms lined up: 20-year AM, 5-year balloon, with monthly payments in this case of $251.25. And again, he also signed a security deed of trust that secured the note to the property, and that would be in second position. And I talked to my friends, and the one thing Dice wanted is he wanted to be in first position. My second friend said, I'm comfortable in second position. I mean, Dice want to be in first position. My second friend said, I'm comfortable in second position. And so then I created a third note. And this is one of the things that when I talked about with my friend Billy, I said, there's going to be a third note. It's going to be for $250,000, 10% interest, and 1 point, 20-year amortization, 5-year balloon. So everything's lining up. But in this case, because it's on $250,000, the payments will be $2,426.43. But I made sure he understood that payment included the $251 payment and Dykes's $1,989 payment. So again, my note and mortgage were going to be wrapping around the Dykes's first, my other friend's second. So they both had just individual mortgages. So, okay, they're there. And then my third mortgage wrapped around both of theirs. So when you look this property up today, what it's going to look like is it has nearly $450,000 in mortgages against it, because you're going to see the first at $220,000, the second at $29,900, and the third at $250,000. But if you'll take the time to read it, when you take the time to read the third mortgage, you'll see that within the bounds of that third mortgage, it includes the first mortgage of $220,000 and the second mortgage of $229,000. It's within its bounds. And the agreement that I made with my friend Billy is he was going to send one check. And then from that check, I would forward 2 additional checks to the lender in first position and the lender in the second position. but just one check came in for the $2,426.43. So then I would pay Dykes, I would pay my other friend, and I got to keep what was left over. And when I went to him and said, "Are you okay with this?" Remember, he's wanting the building. He likes what he sees. He's getting a good deal on it. And he was very comfortable with everything. He was comfortable with me. So a lot of times, one of the things I've learned, people always say, how do you work things out? And you just sit down and you talk to someone. You have a conversation with them. And I'll tell someone real fast that they feel uncomfortable with me. If they feel like, I'm not sure how this is going, then they shouldn't do the deal. I don't ever talk someone into anything. I'll let them know, here's what I can do. And then if it makes them feel comfortable, if they feel them a good solution to their problem, they'll come to me. You just heard Vina talk about a deal where the people went right to her and got the $99,000 loan because, she was easy to work with. They would put out less money up front. They felt comfortable with what was going on. So they said yes to the deal. So don't ever feel that you have to convince someone, that you have to turn the screws to get someone to say yes. Okay. So now let's review what we're looking at. So I used $100 out of my retirement account of the $400 I had in there. So I had $300 left over. And that's what made this thing work. Now at closing, 1 point was paid by the borrower and it went right into the account, my account, which was $2,500. So the $100 went out and then immediately $2,500 went in. Is that a good return on your money? And then each month I get a check from the borrower for $2,426.43. From that, I pay my friend on the first $1,989, and I pay my friend on the second $251, and then I keep $185.53. Now this is where it's important. This is the lesson I learned from Dorsey Botiford. You think, this is this really a big deal? There's only $100 in this from my account, yet it's making $185 per month. So if you're someone that doesn't have a lot of money in your retirement account, or let's say you have not opened up your retirement account, let's say you didn't go see Larissa at Advanta and you didn't do this because you say, I only have $1,000 to put in. I want you to see that you can make the money work if you'll find out what people have, because our job as investors is not to buy, sell, and rent houses. Our job is to help people solve their real estate problems. So my friend Billy had a problem. My friend Dykes had a problem. My other friend that had the 29.9 had a problem. And all I did is turn around and solve problems. So the yield on this investment is 2,226% per year. So if you go to your bank and you want to say, hey, I want that really good savings account that pays 2,226% per year, wouldn't you like to get that one? So was this a good deal? So if you liked the way this looked, if y'all would, give me a hell yeah. Yeah, hell yeah. Okay, I like this.
Venus says that'll buy a lot of Walmart toilet paper, Bill.
So the most important thing here is I felt like I helped people all the way around. And one of the biggest lessons you'll ever learn from Pete Fortunato, if you hear him talk, when he talks about how he's structuring deals, you have to care. You have to care enough to listen. You have to care enough to ask questions. You have to care enough to sit down and then really learn what was going on. And that's all that's happened here. So everybody got helped here. And there's a great saying that Zig Ziglar has. And I heard this saying when I was 19 years old and it changed my entire life. And it's this: you'll get exactly what you want in life if you just help enough other people get what they want. And isn't that what happened here? You heard Vina talk about the different deals she's doing. Isn't that what's happening with the deals that you're seeing tonight?
All right. Thank you, Bill. We're just about ready for Q&A time, and we are real close to being on time even. Like we said, we were going to end at 8:30. I just have a couple more kind of closing thoughts to share before we turn it over to the zillion questions I'm sure we're going to get. So wraps are good, right? Like there's certain situations that you're going to run across over and over. You probably have even seen one of these already that you thought, boy, I could have done this if I'd known how to do it. It's not the only strategy. And I want to bring us around to the bigger thought that it's better to know a lot of strategies than a few strategies. I mean, you need to know how to buy subject to the existing loan. Like that is probably right at this moment, and this changes depending on the market. That's probably the strategy that I'm most excited about going forward.
How come?
Because people are getting loans at 2.85%, and then they can't pay them because they're getting, their restaurants are getting shut down and their daycares are. A guy I know who has always had a job since he graduated from college, and it's always been a highly paid job, got called into the office on Friday and told he was fired because the whole company was shutting down. I think he's on the call, in fact. When you start hearing stories like that, I mean, we heard a lot of, I got laid off from my barkeeping job or whatever. But when you start hearing stories like big corporations are laying off half their employees, that's a serious turn in the economy, and that means people unable to pay their mortgages. And some of these people have gotten these mortgages in the last couple of years, and they're
locked up.
Oh, sorry. Am I back yet? Okay. Um, Every mortgage made in the last 5 years is at sub 5%, and most of them are at sub 4%. And I want to take over all of those, and there's going to be a lot available to take over. So subject to is like I don't love them because I'm prejudiced toward one strategy over another. That's just the one that I see the biggest opportunities in over the next couple of years. There's the other strategy for when the property doesn't have a loan at all, which is seller held mortgages, right? The seller just finances the whole deal for you. And I know this is another place where Bill and I differ a little bit. Bill doesn't do 0% seller held mortgages, and I do almost nothing but 0% seller held mortgages. I don't happen to think that sellers are obsessed with interest when they're trying to get rid of a problem house. So I just always offer them, I'll give you $100,000 at $1,000 a month for 100 months. And they don't even ask me about interest. Contracts for deed are a good strategy for when the seller doesn't have a ton of equity and he wants to sell, and he doesn't want to sell subject to because he doesn't want to give you the title to the property. So those fit in a particular niche. Like you can always buy a house on contract for deed if it doesn't need a ton of work, and you can pretty much match the seller's underlying loan. Long-term lease options, not flipping lease options. That's a whole different thing, and we can have a discussion about that at some other time. But buying houses where you've agreed on the price today, but you don't have to pay it for 10 years is super powerful. And I discovered this from a recent deal I did. It completely settles the seller's issue of, I want to sell, but I kind of don't want to sell because I don't want to pay the taxes. If you've ever talked to a seller like that, the lease option is your solution. Pure options, which is something that Bill's done a lot of and I've done almost none of, but I definitely see the value, and I'm looking for those opportunities. And then of course there's the whole other thing about getting private lenders and partners. Like sometimes the seller can't finance or won't finance, but there's always the opportunity, if you know how to structure it right, to bring in a private lender or a partner to fund deals. Again, Bill and I have had, I don't even know how many conversations about how kind of sad it is that this whole thing that some of us have been doing all along for years and years, but was much better known in the 90s than it is today. It's sad because it means that a lot of people are walking away from a lot of deals because they don't know how to do them, and they're walking away from a lot of wealth because they don't know how to do it. So if you've ever talked to a seller that you're convinced that they're really motivated, but they just can't sell for the low cash price that you've been told to offer, they can't sell at 70 cents on the dollar or less repair costs, these things could come in real handy for you, because you can always pay a seller more if there are good terms. Have any of you guys ever talked to one of these? They typically are older folks. They're usually in their 70s or 80s, and they need to sell. Like, they need to sell. They can't take care of the property. They haven't raised the rents in 15 years because they also haven't done any maintenance in 15 years. They hate them. They like the income, but they hate the properties. And they decide not to sell because their accountant says, well, you're depreciated down to zero, so it's all gain to you. So if you sell that thing for $100,000, you're going to pay $25,000 worth of taxes, and they practically have a heart attack over that because they haven't paid taxes in years. I don't know what kind of marketing you guys are doing, but I talk to at least one of those sellers every week they're like, I want to sell, but I don't want to sell, but it's because of the capital gains. If you knew how to do long-term lease options, you could get control of that property and get all the benefits from it, and he wouldn't have to pay the capital gains tax, at least not until you exercise the option. I recently promised a guy that I would not exercise my option, my 10-year option, for at least 5 years. I said, I've got 10 years to do it, but I promise I won't do it in the first 5 because he didn't want to have any kind of taxable thing happening to him in the next 5 years. Anybody here ever found yourself not qualified to get a bank loan? I'm not qualified to get a conventional loan. You know why? I have too many conventional loans. So for some of us, like, seller finance and private finance and partners is the only way to get long-term investments financed. And then here's a question that I just kind of want to ask to everybody. If I could wave a magic wand and magically take the issue of money out of the picture, you no longer need a bunch of cash to buy properties, would you own more long-term investments than you do right now? That's a real question. Like 3 people say, oh, okay, here they come. And I find that's true of even people who are like flipping a lot of properties will say, well, I'm only flipping them to build up the cash so that I can go and buy investment properties, because my real goal is not to work, and flipping properties is work, as I well know. What I really want to do is I want to own, 20 long-term great rentals that I love that are going to throw off enough cash to support me for the whole rest of my life. And I say, well, what are you waiting for? And they say, well, I got to flip some more properties. And I say, well, couldn't you just buy them creatively? And they say, what? I guess I could. I don't know how, though. So understanding that these deal structures solve a lot of those problems for you. And I'm going to take literally 2 minutes to gently invite you, if you said yes to any of the questions on the former page, to a workshop that Bill and I are doing coming up on February the 19th through 21st in Tampa. It's called the Ultimate Creative Deal Structuring Workshop. It is the workshop that we gave back in April online, and we are going to, by God, do it live this time. It was supposed to be live last time, and it's going to be live this time in Tampa. Now, we are very aware that there's still a lot of folks who are concerned about travel and concerned about being around other people. So the live part of the workshop is limited to 100 people. And that means that you can also choose to attend online. We're going to be simulcasting the workshop, and you can sit in the comfort of your own home in your bunny slippers if you like, and attend the same event. What you're going to learn there is how to do all of those deal structures I just mentioned. Yes, wrap mortgages, but also subject tos, owner held financing, lease options, pure options, partner deals, land contract deals, private lending deals. And because like we know it's not just about the paperwork and like how does the structure work, we're also going to talk about stuff like how in the world do you find these people in the first place? How do you find the sellers that are maybe open to doing these deals? And how do you talk to them? Because you don't talk to them by shoving a contract in their face and saying, here, this is what I'm suggesting, sign this. Every form of financing that we're going to talk about has with the cost of the course, the forms, sample forms and contracts to do it. Now, obviously, every one of these creative deals is actually a little bit different. So you're going to take these home as samples and you're going to take them to your knowledgeable local attorney and tell him what deal you're doing. And he's going to like make it exactly like what you need it to do, but it's a lot cheaper to go to your competent local attorney with this is what the basics of what I'm trying to do, and here's how I need it changed, than it is to pay them for it. So of course, it's at this point that I tell you it's $70,000 and you guys should all go call your credit card companies and up your limits and get some more credit cards and stack the credit cards. Oh, wait, this is the wrong, I thought I was in a different seminar. It's $797 to attend this thing. That should say $1097 for two. I don't know why it says something different than that. If you decide to come and join us live, because as a couple of people have mentioned, live is really better if you feel comfortable with it. You get to network with other people who are like-minded, you get to be in the room, ask questions, all of that sort of thing. So to encourage people to come live, we're going to give you $100 travel allowance if you decide to come to Tampa. So it's $797, but if you come to Tampa, it's only $697. Or if you want to bring a partner, $997 for the two of you. We're going to do the usual tonight only offer that really is tonight only. Those of you who are on me or Bill's email list got a number of emails, a fair warning prior to December 31st that said there was this early bird period that ended on December 31st, and it's only $597 if you sign up right now, or $897 for two people, and a bunch of you ignored it or didn't get it. So if you register tonight before midnight, I'm about to give you a coupon code for this. We'll pretend that you didn't ignore those emails and that it is December 30th, and you can get in either live or online for the early bird price, the old early bird price of $597 for one or $897 for two. Now, I'm only talking to a few people who are here right now. If you are a Fast Track member, or you are a previous attendee, you did this class in April, you need to put that in the chat so that Matt can send you a coupon code that will get you in cheaper even than the early bird price. If you tell Matt that you are a Fast Track student or a previous attendee to get the coupon code and it turns out you're not, your money will be refunded and you will be asked not to attend. So Fast Track students and previous attendees only, put that in the chat and Matt will give you an additional coupon code. So when I say it's guaranteed to solve those problems for you, I mean literally guaranteed. You come to this class, we don't care if it's live or online, you get to the end, like you can sit through the whole time, and if at the end you're not just like, that was the best, most simply explained, most complete creative deal structuring class I have ever taken in my life, and now I am very confident that I can go out and make some of these deals, you tell us and we'll refund whatever your investment was in coming to the class. So the reason you need to do this tonight is A, it's cheaper and you guys are cheap. I get it, I'm cheap too. You need to use the coupon code EB to get the $597 price. The other thing that we've been wrestling with all day, because registrations have been coming in fast and furious just lately, is if you want to attend live, we are down to 20 seats in the live class. We have a room that would normally hold, I don't know, Bill, I'd guess that room would, we were in that room for pizza event. I would say it would normally hold 250 or something. I mean,
300.
it's 300. It's a huge room, but because of the social distancing, the hotel and also us, because we want everybody to be safe, say that there can only be 100 people in it. And there are already 80 of those seats claimed. So if you have been like seeing the emails going, oh yeah, I got to get around to that, this is the time to do it, because by tomorrow we may literally be saying, sorry, it's online only unless we wait list you and somebody doesn't show up. So only 20 seats left. The way to register is at billandkimcook.com. If you go to the little events tab there, it's the first thing under the events tab. Or if you're one of those people that's like, I don't like putting my credit card on the internet, or I have more questions, you can call Kim. Her number is up on the screen, and be patient, because if like 10 people call her all at once, she's going to be returning voicemails. Just leave a voicemail if you don't get
Someone's
her.
calling her right now. Her phone's ringing.
Tell her what, hey, this is like a fun drive on public radio. Oh, all lines are busy right now, folks, but keep patient. Operators are standing by. The operator is Kim. So that's her number. If you're not getting through to it, write it down, because I'm about to go on to the Q&A session here. I do want to encourage you guys to come. I gotta say,
Hey,
I don't.
Bina,
Yeah.
Kim just said that she will return calls tomorrow.
Okay. So leave her a voicemail.
I can do it later.
She can do it later tonight.
Yeah. What are we going to do about the fact that this only lasts till midnight,
Yeah.
Kim?
No, she's going to do it. She'll do it tonight. She's gonna,
Okay. Okay, cool. So
we're in a 300 square foot box.
I thought there was no box.
And yet I live in one. Go figure.